Welcome to the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels in Olean, New York. My name is Jennifer Kane, and I'm going to be your tour director today on this blustery cold winter day. Today, the day after Christmas, St. Stephen's Day. And we're so thrilled to have you here at our very first live tour we've ever given here at the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels. So we'll see how this goes. Welcome to one and all. And if you are watching us live, don't forget that you can make comments down below, and you might have some questions, and we'll try to answer some of those. We're going to be monitoring that. We'll try to answer some of those for you. We're starting out today outside the Basilica so that you have a sense of the architecture of this building and its style and where it sets in the landscape in this countryside. We are in Olean, New York, and Olean is 65 miles south of Buffalo, and it's just a couple of miles away from the Pennsylvania border. That's how south we are, and that border is just a couple of miles behind us here. We're also along the Allegheny River, and this is where Olean began, here at the headwaters, the most northern navigable point of the Allegheny River, which flows into Pittsburgh. So since the early 19th century, Olean's been here engaging in lumber activities and all kinds of things dealing with water transportation, moving goods and people down to Pittsburgh and points west during particularly the early part of the 19th century. So the Catholics didn't get here until 1850s, and they were here a little bit earlier, but they didn't really organize until the 1850s, and they purchased this lot. The Olean Catholics purchased this lot about 1852, 1853, and this church, beautiful basilica you see behind me, is actually the third church on this lot. We had two others. We'll talk about those when we get inside when it's a little bit warmer. This church was built in 1915. Now, it is a basilica. You see this in the name of the church. It does have its own. It is entitled to a coat of arms that you can see here. This is our coat of arms for Basilica of St. Mary the Angel. Now, we are a minor basilica because what that acknowledges by the Vatican is that this is a noble house, a noble place of worship, a noble place of spiritual center. And its nobility comes from its great architecture, its important art, and its amazing history that makes it worthy for pilgrims to come and visit and come here for their own spiritual edification. Now, above and beyond other churches, so the Vatican has recognized it. Above and beyond other churches, it's noted for its particular art, architecture, and history. And so that's what we're going to be examining. What was it exactly that intrigued the Vatican so much to give this little church in this rural section of Western New York such international designation? And so we'll talk about that. You'll see we are in a valley. Olean is in a valley. We are surrounded by we call them mountains, they're really hills, and we call them the Enchanted Mountains. And so that's the setting of where we are, where this has been located since where the Catholics have been worshiping in this part of the Diocese of Buffalo since the 1850s. 1850 is when the first Mass was said in our city. So we're going to continue. I want to step back a little bit so you can see the architecture here. It's important to note that this is Gothic, or Gothic Revival, we'll call it. Gothic was developed in the Middle Ages because we were looking for a different type of architecture to build our houses of worship and at our important buildings. We had been using in Europe the architecture of the Greeks and the Romans, and very beautiful, stately, and it served us very well. But in the Middle Ages, they thought, we really need Christian architecture that comes and is birthed from Christian culture. So they developed Gothic style, notably the verticality of everything. Everything points up. There's not a lot of horizontal going on here, as you can see in this picture. Now we have classically two towers, East and West Tower, capped by enormous belfries, and yes, they contain the largest bell in this entire region, and it also contains on the east side on your left, a large set of Deegan chimes, 24 set Deegan chimes. It is the last set of Deegan chimes of this quality, of this style that they made in Chicago, that is still working today. There are 4 in existence that are left. This one is at St. Mary of the Angels is still in operation, so it's really wonderful musical instrument for the entire community. Take a look at the stonework here. This is all marble. It used to be really pristine white, but with pollution and time and whatever, we get the stone has darkened. It used to be very pearly white. This is marble that was quarried in West Grove, Pennsylvania. Now, the other wonderful Gothic features, of course, are the pointed arches, as opposed to, let's say, Roman arches are very smooth. So you see every arch in here, even in the windows, in the glass work, in the front doors, even everything has a little point to it. Also, above the 3 main entrance doors, we see in the stonework and those points quatrefoils. Those also are a little design feature element of Gothic architecture. So this was all, and I want you to also notice out here the enormity of that central window that is 20 feet high by 16 feet wide. And it's an amazing size window. We have 3 of them that size. We also have another set of enormous windows up and down the nave, which you're going to look at. That's the side of the church. We can't see that here. But the windows are out of scale with a building this size. And there's a reason for that, which we'll explain in the warm interior of this church in just a moment, I promise you. But one more thing I want you to see. We're going to swing around and take a look at the house across the street. This is an Olean treasure. It is now a private residence, but it did serve, initially it was built as the rectory for St. Mary of the Angels in 1880. This is a lovely little American Queen Anne, great style. And this has been added on to over the years to accommodate more pastors, and has had some modifications made to the front porch and so forth. But this was the rectory where our first resident pastor actually died there. We'll talk about him too. He lived his whole life here, and a lot of important things happened in this lovely building. It was sold in the 1980s, so it had a good life with the parish for 100 years. It is now a private residence, and our rectory is elsewhere on the property, a little closer to the church, and not across the street, so a little safer. So you can see the beautiful snowy day here on St. Stephen's Day, the day after Christmas. And what we're going to do is walk inside, and come on, we'll take a look now. You can see again this enormous window up above. That's a crucifixion scene. We'll see it better from the inside, but I wanted you to have a point of reference for that window and the size of these windows. These are original doors. Every door, exterior door here, is original 1915. These are all solid oak. All of them have been refurbished. So come on in and take a look. Now the first thing we're going to see is we are in the vestibule. So I'm going to walk over here. You can take a look at some of the windows in here. These are all Munich style windows. Now some of you are not going to really see with the lighting that we have thus far, but this one of St. Mary of the Angels is particularly lovely up above. Now Munich style windows are not stained glass. These are clear, it is clear glass, painted and then fired. They are glorious works of art. You'll see that the artisans, these are immigrant artisans from Germany and Austria who were working in Chicago in 1919 and before, actually 1917 originally, and they painted all these windows. And we're going to get into that because the windows here are the glory of St. Mary of the Angels. People have been coming here for over 100 years to see them when they were installed in 1919. Now the vestibule is very important. We're talking about Christian architecture. Remember, we talked about that in Catholic architecture at the time. The vestibule was very important because as we build the church, what were they thinking back then 100 years ago? outside, you remember, it's sort of dingy out. It also, at the time, 100 years ago, these streets weren't paved. Some of the downtown streets were paved. This little part of Henley, I think, was paved at the time. But most of the streets around Olean were not paved. And so and they were heating with coal, so it's dark, it's dingy out there. We had up to 6 different railroads coming through Olean at the time, so it was a major transportation hub, but the soot from the trains was incredible. So it's a dark, dirty world. People wore dark clothes on purpose. That's just the way it was. Now, the whole idea is coming into church. The interior decor of the church is supposed to knock your socks off. It's supposed to be lovely. It's supposed to be beautiful. Beauty is, after all, a quality of God. And so that we want to, the whole point was to get you to think about the eternal, about heaven, about spiritual things, and get in touch with your own spirituality. So we're going to leave the world. We're going to come into a vestibule, which is a middle ground. And then we're going to enter. This gets you to stop. It gets you to calm down. Wegmans does this in Buffalo. Okay, this is part of, it's a deliberate feature in architecture. It gets you to just calm down, and then you can enter the building and be wowed. But while we're in here in the vestibule, a couple of things I want to point out to you. First of all, we have a lot of famous Olean names all throughout. They're all etched in. These are some of the folks who contributed in 1915 to the building of this particular building. And so their names are forever etched in here. And we have a lot of Irish and German names, particularly there. Also, the Syrian colony donated as well. We have them noted there because they came later in the 19th century to Olean and used this church for their divine services as well. So, but take a look at the stencil work up above. So this was decorated in 1924. And by an artist named John Alvin, and he was an Olean artist who was known for his stenciling and interior decorations of not only churches but also residences. Stenciling was very popular at the time, and so he created a lot of viney imagery, as you can see in this stenciling. And the vine imagery is very common in churches because this gives you a sense of Eden, okay, the Garden of Eden. We have a sense of that. It's very beautiful. And we're thinking of, again, at time, we're thinking of things of heaven. But the other more important motif with this, with the vines, is John 15, verse 5. Jesus says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. And without me, you can do nothing." And that explains why we go to church. So as Catholics, we go to church to receive the sacraments. It could be confession, it could be marriage, it could be going to Holy Communion at Mass. So here we are baptized here into the Christian family, and so we receive the nourishment here of the Word and Sacrament, and then we go out into the world, because without Jesus we can do nothing. So that imagery is going to significantly play in the art that we see in the paintings and the ceilings up above, and we'll get into that later on. This is a church that took 100 years to decorate. It did not look like this when it first opened in 1915, when Venerable Nelson Baker came here to open and bless this church. We'll talk about him in a little bit, so let's go inside. And I'll let you go first. This is astonishingly beautiful. I hope you can see on the camera. And now we are decorated for Christmas, which makes it even more lovely time of year to come and visit. So let's unpack a little of this art and see what we're talking about here. One of the glories of this particular building is its architecture. We had a wonderful architect by the name of Emile Ulrich, and he was born in Paris, trained in Paris in the prestigious art schools there, came to the United States as a young man, and worked in Cleveland and designed churches there and other public buildings. And he was, we'll talk about the pastor at the time when this church was being built. He was asked by the pastor to come and design a church for us here in Olean, New York, and it had to be Gothic revival style. We talked about that outside. Bishop Colton at the time in Diocese of Buffalo wanted this to be a Gothic style church, a Gothic revival church. Now, all the major churches, Catholic churches in New York State were Gothic style. And we'll start with St. Patrick's in New York as the prime example of that. And so the cathedral in Buffalo, Gothic style as well. This was to be an important church. Now, we aren't the first church in Olean to go from a little wooden church to stone. We'll talk about our wooden phase, the wood phase, a little bit later. But other churches also up the ante here in Olean, and the Protestant churches had already converted from wooden churches to stone by 1915. The Presbyterian being the one most recent and before us. And so it had to be noble, because Olean was thought to be, that was projected to be a great and important cosmopolitan center because of the oil industry. So the late 19th century, early 20th century, the center of the oil industry in the world was right here in this region. Pennsylvania, this part of New York State. But Olean in particular, because remember the railroads I talked to you about, up to 6 lines coming in here. This was the repository of oil. So it was the largest repository of oil in the entire world, and there wasn't even a close second. So of course, it was projected and forecasted that Olean would be this great thriving metropolis one day. St. Mary of the Angels was going to be the anchor church, as it had always served for so long. But it was going to be designated as an important anchor church down here in this part of the Diocese of Buffalo. Well, vast tracts of oil were discovered in Oklahoma and Texas, and there went the oil industry as we knew it back then. It's still here, it's still vibrant, but it's nothing. The entire industry really moved to Texas and Oklahoma. Also, the transportation industry. Well, we were very heavily centered on transportation with rail, and then the automobile. Who knew that was going to take over transportation needs? And so that waned as well. And Olean settled back to its charming rural aspects of the town. And so those grand designs for it being a big thriving metropolis went away. So neat, but regardless, in the midst of all of this planning and forecasting, we were to build something wonderful and grand, and certainly we did. The whole intent was to, again, make you think of God, make you think of heaven, lift and elevate your spirit and your soul. So you come in now, you're in a different type of a world. It's a very romantic world, which Gothic always evokes, I think. And you see also in these, not only in the beautiful windows, but also in the statuary and in the beautiful paintings, which we're going to unpack all this art in a bit. Now, we talked a little about the history when the Catholics first came here in the 1850s, and a priest will come through, a little missionary priest will come through from the diocese, maybe 6 times a year. They would have Mass at somebody's home, and the Catholics would gather, and that's about all we could do at the time. There weren't very many priests in the diocese, and the diocese also included Rochester. So we had a lot of territory to cover for very few priests. So we needed to get more in, and thankfully a wonderful story about how the Franciscans came to Allegheny, which is just 3 miles down the road. And so when the Franciscans came from Italy, and they established St. Bonaventure College, as they called it at the time, and it's still here to this day. And they also, with the friars that came to work at the college, also worked on weekends servicing little mission churches around the southern part of western New York. So very important. The college president was named pastor of the mission church in Olean, St. Mary of the Angels. So he was named the pastor. Now, before the friars came, those Irish immigrants, they were predominantly Irish, and there was about 10% German in the demographics here for Catholics here in Olean. And they got together, and as I said, they bought this lot, but they didn't build the church you would think of. It was out of wood, but it was lumber that they cut from trees a couple of blocks away, and then they had it milled and built what they called a shanty church. And for years they called it the Shanty and referred to it as the Shanty Church. Never had a name. And shanty, of course, is that Irish term that is not very flattering. It's about the most rudimentary building that you can build. And so that's what was here. Well, the friars wanted none of that. So while they are building St. Bonaventure at the same time, the president of St. Bonaventure College, Father Pamphilo de Magliano, decided, I'm going to get a church built here. So he worked on the financing with the Catholics, and they got this wonderful little wooden church built. Here it is. Here's a picture. I've got a picture of it here that you can see, and this is what was on this lot. And so a little wooden structure here, and this is what Father Pamphilus built. Later on, it was added on to the point that this little church had another wings added onto it on both sides. This could seat 900 people. It was and Olean became, or the Catholics now became the largest congregation for sure, and they still are to this day, of Christian congregations here in the Olean area. So this was their little church that they built. Now, they served very well for about 20 years. The friars would come, but they didn't live here. They lived on the campus of St. Bonaventure, and so they would come back and forth 3 miles down the road and serve this community very well. Then one year in 1875, the second bishop of Buffalo, Bishop Stephen Ryan, decided he is going to remove Olean from missionary status. It has become so many Catholics here, and it really needed to be a part of the Diocese of Buffalo. And so he integrated the Olean community properly into as a parish in the Diocese of Buffalo. Now, this is a large blow-up of the document that is a very interesting document that we have. It's original, and we have it in our archives, safekeeping. It was a very small piece of paper, and this document is from the bishop assigning Father John Hamill to Olean. And so here's his signature, and that was on the 24th of November in 1876. So this little piece of paper was folded up. You can even see some of the fold lines in this blow-up version. This was folded up and carried by the pastor, the very first resident pastor to come to Olean, and his name was John J. Hamill. Father Hamill in 1875 just graduated and was from St. Bonaventure University and was ordained there. And the next year, at age 26, here's his ordination picture, the young man, at age 26, he comes to Olean, New York. Now, he's a young guy who, all this time in 20 years, who has been preaching to this congregation in that little country wooden church but the president of St. Bonaventure University, college professors that he took courses from. Now he comes in and he's the pastor. Talk about a daunting task. So now he's got to take control of this community and bring them into, literally into the 20th century. This is 1876. He is going to stay here in Olean until the day he dies. Remember, we talked about the house across the street that was the rectory. That's the rectory he built, and he died there in 1912. Spent his whole life here. On the day of his funeral, which was in mid-January of 1912, remember that church I said held about 900 people. It could hold 1,000 people, standing room only, and using the choir loft. They had to turn away as many people as they could seat that day in 1912. It was the largest funeral ever held in the city of Olean up to that point in time. Now, why was that? Well, Father Hamill was just a dearly beloved individual and great leader here in the Olean community. He began the parochial school system, for instance, and which we still have today from pre-K all the way through 8th grade. The parochial school system for children is still in operation here in the Olean area. Also, he was known as a great lecturer and scholar. He received an honorary doctorate in law from St. Bonaventure University and was just tremendously beloved by the folks in this community. You can imagine when he died, it was a real blow to the community, and you would feel sorry for the next guy coming in. So he served here for 36 long years. So the next pastor who's going to come and who's going to be assigned came from Ellicottville. And if you drive in Ellicottville, you'll know the Catholic Church there is built by the same construction company that built this church. So now we're going to have, this is an older picture of him. I've got a younger one in that case over there, but we'll take a look at this older picture of Monsignor Edward Rangel. Now, he was assigned as a young man. He was 43 years old, actually, when he came here. And Bishop Colton told him he had to take down the wooden church and build the stone church. This is going to be Gothic, and it was going to be something grand and wonderful. Bishop Colton had his fingers in everything dealing with the design of this church. And so his job was to, not only did they lose their pastor, now they're going to lose their church because we're going to build a new one. And he had to rally the troops of the Catholics in town and let's get this going. Well, by then the Catholic community split up, and St. John the Evangelist had opened up already in 1895. We had Transfiguration Church, I believe that was 1902. So we had a couple of other splits in the Catholic community, but St. Mary the Angels was still the largest congregation and the original congregation of all of them. So he's coming in and he's got to have that portion of the Olean Catholic community to build this church. So he's the one who found Emil Ulrich, the architect, and brought him in to design this church. So it was opened up in, as I said, it took them 3 years. They set the cornerstone in 1913. Opened up this building in September of 1915, and what a feast for the eyes it was for the people at that time. Now, it was minus these windows, though. These came 4 years later. So the windows were like an opaque shower glass type glazing that is affixed to the outside of the building. The art glass is affixed on the inside of the building. Okay. All of these windows are the Munich style, as I talked about. You see how when we were outside, I said that this building is, that the windows are out of scale for a building this size. Why is that? Now we take a look at this long nave, this long central aisle here. This is on a north-south access because the lot that the Catholics purchased in 1852 was a long, narrow lot. This is the only way it could even with the old country church, it was laid out this way. Normally, you want to lay your Catholic churches on an east-west axis so that the priest offering the sacrifice of the Mass is facing east. Well, we can't do that here. So, in his genius, Emil Ulrich said, fine, then we are going to play up the sunlight, because now we're going to have all this sun coming in on the east and setting on the west. So what he did was he designed enormous windows for the naves on the east and west side of this basilica, so that what is going to sing in this church is the light coming through glorious paintings on glass. Again, as I said, this is not stained glass. This is high art, high painting on glass. It's a technique developed in Germany and Austria. But remember, this opened in 1915. The windows were installed in 1919. We went through a World War I. Germany and Austria were not going to be producing glass that was coming over here to America at the time. De Prado's statuary, we see that in this window of the Pieta in the corner. It says it's signed by De Prado Statuary in Chicago. And we called them and had a nice chat with the family that is still associated with that company in Chicago. And yes, they started up an art glass studio in 1917, and they made these windows. These windows are exquisite, not only for the high art, but for their enormous size. So these windows are 8 feet wide by an amazing 18 feet high. And they're all American made. And they made a point to say probably by the immigrants that came from Germany and Austria, who had perfected this wonderful technique and were able to paint these windows. Now we're going to talk about them in a little bit. Let's go down to the sanctuary, because you see here Emil Ulrich's design. We're going to be walking down a 22-inch slope. This is common in all of the Emil Ulrich churches, including Our Lady of Victory, because he also, so enamored was Father Baker, Monsignor Baker at the time in Buffalo, that he hired Emil Ulrich to design Our Lady of Victory shrine and basilica. So let's go this way. I had a picture of Nelson Baker here for those who've never seen him. He is venerable, and his remains are in Our Lady of Victory Shrine and Basilica in Lackawanna, New York, just outside of Buffalo. So he's a Buffalo boy, and he blessed and opened this church in 1915 and was the first to preach at that pulpit. So we'll walk down this way. And as you look at everything, you know, when they go to design a Catholic church, particularly back then, everything is at the service of the mysteries celebrated here. So those mysteries are always the 7 sacraments. So we have these beautiful confessionals on your right and on your left in the transepts. You're going to have a baptismal font. It wasn't always here in this location on the St. Joseph's side altar. We had a special baptistry for that, but it's original, and we have moved it to that location here. Weddings are celebrated here. Baptisms, of course, celebrated here, as we said. And most importantly also is the sacrifice of the Mass or Holy Eucharist. So this is the central point of any Catholic church is going to be the altar of sacrifice and the tabernacle containing the Eucharist itself. So everything in here is oriented to the altar of sacrifice and the tabernacle, which you can see in gold. Now, this is all original, and one of the things about this church very different from many others is the fact that nothing was removed, really, of any significance in all the years that this has been here since 1915. We've added things. We've added art. We have added some statuary. We have added the new central altar after Vatican II, reorienting the priest to look towards the faithful at Mass, but everything is original. So let's take a look at some of this marble that we see. This is all Carrara marble from Italy. And the magnificent high altar. So this is where your eye is drawn when you come in, as it should be. Again, you see all the Gothic details in here, the trefoils and quatrefoils, the pointy arches, and in this magnificent 30-foot high altar. And then we have the side altars and a communion railing and the pulpit, all made out of Carrara marble again. And let's take a look over here at the two side altars for a moment. I want to draw your attention. We'll look at the Carrara marble, but I want to go straight up to the painting. One of the things that Father Hamill did, he would travel to Europe on occasion, and he would procure some wonderful art for his church, to decorate his church. These two are still in existence and were transferred from the old church to here. I've got two paintings I will show you. They're each over the side altars, and they're really magnificent paintings. These are from Germany. They are from the there was a man, his last name was Plockhorst, and he had started this Nazarene movement of art in Germany, and he developed paintings for religious subjects that was very naturalistic to the times of Jesus, using the hairstyles and clothing that were probably people of the time period of Jesus actually wore. And so this became highly stylized and favored art at the time in the late 19th century. He bought these about 1895, and so this is the very famous one. You've probably seen this before. It's just a copy of his Jesus the Good Shepherd. And below that we have Mary. The statue of Mary is as the Immaculate Conception. That dogma was officially decreed around the time that the first Mass was said here in Olean. Remember, around 1850, and so that it's a very precious time for us. She is the patroness of the United States. Is Mary, the Immaculate Conception. So we'll take a look over. And this is a vintage 19th century. Nativity scene also here that you see. We have this up every year. So we'll take a look on the other side of the altar and take at the other side altar. This one is dedicated to Saint Joseph. And again, we have another Nazarene movement school of art, painting, Plockhorst design from Germany. Another painting. This is Jesus with blessing the little children from Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. And this, again, you notice the sweet, sentimental nature of these paintings, probably very much correlated with the personality of Father Hamill. That's my guess, because, you know, you're kind of known by the art you choose. And he had these very sweet, sentimental, beautiful, tender depictions of Jesus, which is really wonderful in a pastor, and he probably was that way by all accounts. So then so these were affixed here. They were here in 1915. None of the paintings behind in the sanctuary were here. We had a lot of water damage, and whatever was here it was decorative, but it has been removed. This is all from 1952. I'll talk about that in just a moment. 1919, as I said, is when the windows came. Now, these, again, Munich style. If you're going to go and put develop windows with religious art in them, what are you going to use it for content exactly? Are you going to use saints? Are you going to use Bible stories? Are you going to, what do you do? So Father Rangel, in his wisdom, sought the aid of another St. Bonaventure University president by the name of Thomas Plasman. Now, Thomas Plasman was known as a biblical scholar in his own right and internationally. And he also was known for decorating churches and having a hand in helping come up with design concepts for churches. And so he readily helped St. Mary the Angels come up with themes for our windows. Our present parochial vicar, Father David Tourville, said that these windows are really like a family photo album of Jesus in the life of with his mother Mary. The patroness of this church, as we said before, is St. Mary of the Angels. And that's a name that was given to it by another St. Bonaventure University professor, Father Pamphilus de Magliano, the first president of St. Bonaventure. He was the one that built the little wooden church. He named it St. Mary of the Angels. It's a very Franciscan name, and it's for the beloved Church of St. Francis in Assisi. It's his favorite church. The cradle, actually, of the Franciscan order is that church in Assisi. So we're named after that church. So Mary's going to, as the patroness here, is going to factor into the art, and so she certainly with these windows. So we're going to start. If you're going to look at the life of Jesus and Mary, we're going to start with his conception. So we have the scene of the Annunciation. You can probably see that. I'll stand behind the camera so I can see what you're filming there. Yeah, so we can see that. The angel Gabriel comes to Mary, announces that she will conceive, the Holy Spirit will come upon her. She will conceive the Christ child, the Messiah that everybody had been so long awaited for. Now, we're going to continue on in the life of Jesus and Mary chronologically. Across the way, we were not going to get into all these because this way we don't want to swing the camera back and forth, but across the way is going to be companion windows. So the companion window to this is the dream of Joseph. That's beautiful. You should come in and see that. Next, large window. Remember the large window we saw outside, how large that was. This is the same size. This is 20 feet tall by 16 feet wide. This is our famous nativity window. Here we see Jesus comes down from heaven to earth, is how this window was described by Father Plasman. And we'll just take a walk down. We're going to get a little closer to the windows so you can see them. We're going to go through the life of Jesus and Mary. Then we have the presentation of Jesus in the temple as an infant. Mary and Joseph bring him there. This pairs nicely across the aisle. We're going to see the presentation of Mary in the temple. So next we have Jesus found in the temple, the Christ child at age 12. You remember that story. He was lost. His parents found him there, as he said, doing his father's work, following his father's will. But he went home and dutifully obeyed his parents. And then he performs his first miracle. This, of course, is the wedding feast of Cana. And again, the windows opposite are that's paired with the lovely betrothal of Mary and Joseph. What they're doing is copying very popular works of Christian art. These are scenes that would be completely recognizable to people. They would know these scenes. Now, here we see this sad scene of Mary encountering her son carrying the cross. And finally, we end up with this beautiful window of the Pieta, we call this. This is Mary accepts receives her son's body upon his death. That's how this was described by Father Thomas Plasman. And again, this was, we'll take a picture of Father Rangel, as long as we're back here one more time. He came when Father Hamill died in 1912. He stayed on until the day he died in 1956. He died on his feast day, the Feast of St. George. Or not George, Edward, Feast of St. Edward. But so he was here 44 long years. So let's add up the years those two pastors alone were here. Father Hamill, 36 years. Father Rangel was here for 44 years. That's 80 years. Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels had 2 pastors. So quite remarkable, isn't it? So that was him. Mary, could I have you grab the book that I left in the on that font? So much of what I'm talking about today, I mean, I'm trying to just rush through this history for you, but mixed in with the art and the culture and everything, it can be found in the history book of the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels called A Place Set Apart. I wrote this just after we were named a minor basilica. This is a fruit of all the research we did going into the basilica application process. So everything's in here. You can see lots of great vintage photos and everything. We're going to talk about the art and the culture and the history and everything going on here in Olean at the time. That's all in this book, so I want to refer you to that. We're going to head back up to the sanctuary because we're moving up in time now. We're still decorating this church. Now the windows are in, and it got pretty dark in here because they were used to all the light coming in from the clear glass, but now they had to redo the lighting. So in 1924, they put in the chandeliers that you see today. Those are all original from that time to help boost the lighting in here. There's grand celebration for the 50th anniversary of becoming a parish in the Diocese of Buffalo. I mean, what other parish celebrates that? Who celebrates the day that they became a parish in the Diocese of Buffalo? We do. But also with that day is the day that Father Hamill came. Okay, so we're going to now move up to 1952 because now we're going to decorate this church for the 100th anniversary of the Catholics in Olean. Remember, they established themselves. So the first Mass was in 1850. They established and bought this lot early part of the 1850s. So now in 1952, we're going to have a big celebration for all the Catholics because this was our common heritage, was establishing ourselves here on this lot. So a lot more decoration was done. Now we're going to decorate the back sanctuary walls. And what they did was they had De Prado Statuary had painting facilities in New York. So they had these wonderful symbols painted. And these are classic symbols for here what we see is the mysteries of the rosary, of the Holy Rosary. So we're going to have glorious mysteries on the right, depicted on our right, and sorrowful mysteries, 5 of them there on the left. There's a couple more they didn't put in there, but those are 2 sets of mysteries there for reciting the Holy Rosary and the symbols from each one of those mysteries. We have the phoenix, for instance, as the symbol of the resurrection. That was a very, very common symbol. They had the angels up above. This is all very classic from even biblical times. And then, of course, our patroness, St. Mary of the Angels, you see, as a stylized version of the famous Bergeron painting of St. Mary of the Angels, and this is just sort of a version of that. And then we have heroic size paintings of the 4 evangelists, because this is where the Word of God is preached, is in this sanctuary. So that makes sense. Also way above in the clerestory section of the building, we've got the medallions signifying the 12 apostles. Now, these 12 apostles, I'm in the wrong angle because I brought you down the wrong aisle. But these 12 apostles, hopefully you can see some of these symbols up there for them. And this was all decorated by John Alvin. He's still here in the 1950s and decorated all the borders around there with 12 different colors of paint. Now, in 2015, we're going to have another celebration here in Olean because remember, Father Baker, Venerable Nelson Baker, opened and blessed this building, this wonderful church in 1915. So in 2015, we're going to have a celebration. It's time to do some more decorating. Switek Studios, under the direction of Brett Switek up in Buffalo, looked at this and said, I think you really need to do something with your ceilings, because these were all just a cream white color at the time. In 2015, they had some fans up there. That's about it, some ceiling fans. So Brett Switek came up with this design. He's going to use the vine imagery we saw from John Alvin from the vestibule. Remember that? So he's going to use that. Also, he understands also in religious art and in church buildings, you want to blend a little bit of earth, heaven and earth, because we're sort of in between heaven and earth when you're in a church. Okay, this is supposed to elevate your spiritual consciousness and your sense of the divine. And so he literally blends heaven and earth in the ceiling by combining gold, which is the classic color for heaven, and blue, which is the classic color for earth in iconography. Blue is also a Marian color. It evokes the Blessed Virgin Mary. So he literally entwines them into these glorious ceilings. It took us 18 months. It was really quite an enormous artistic task to paint these ceilings. And so then with that painting of the ceilings, really the art in here was complete. It took us 100 years. You'll see the statuary also with the Stations of the Cross were completely refurbished, also for the 100th anniversary. Now we're going to go up into the sanctuary a little bit. I want to talk about finally about our basilica symbols. Okay, our basilica symbols, and then we will wrap up this tour. And remember, you're welcome to come here at any time. We'll always reverence the tabernacle. You're welcome to come. We don't have tours for groups because of COVID, but when those restrictions are lifted, we'll go back to that. But I want to talk to you about the symbolism of the minor basilicas. You'll see this. This will tell you that this is a minor basilica. If you see this scarlet and gold ombrellino, classic colors of the city of Rome. This evokes it's a very old symbol of our relationship of a minor basilica to the Pope. He gave us the title and the honor. In this case, it was Pope Francis who gave us this title and honor. And so we have what they call an ombrellino, and also tintinnabulum, which has a little tiny bell in it. And these are two processional items. You see them on a pole. Symbolic. They're very heavy. If the Pope ever did come to this region, he would certainly visit one of his basilicas, and we're ready for him because we would have a procession and have these processional items in there. It's a partially opened umbrella because we're always anticipating a visit from the Pope. Again, these are ancient symbols. And we've embellished these with coats of arms of the Diocese of Buffalo and our own coat of arms. We also have St. Francis's, or Pope Francis's coat of arms, the coat of arms of the Franciscans, who were so much part of our history here. And so anyway, so Diocese of Buffalo, we have Bishop Malone's coat of arms as well, and we'll bring it back to the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels. Brett Switek and his crew created the tintinnabulum for us, honoring Our Lady of the Angels with a beautiful little bell in there. This was a gift of the Franciscan friars at St. Bonaventure. Very fitting, since they were so much a part of our early history, and they named our church St. Mary of the Angels. And so that's going to complete our tour Any other questions that you have on there? Okay. So thank you so much it's such a pleasure to be able to finally give a tour again and to be able to do this again. I hope that we have a wonderful coffee table book also that's on our website, and you can, got a copy of that here. This has all the wonderful photography, and this is actually part of the book that we actually sent to the Vatican as part of our application. So you can see this is a really wonderful book that shows, it's got aerial photography and interior photography and what have you. So, and it really explains our wonderful works of art in much more detail. Great book to have if you want that, for the history and all of the wonderful historical photos that we have of the building of this church, the early Franciscans who were here and so forth. That's all in this book, smaolean.org, if you want to do that. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please visit our website often, see what's happening. Come down here and visit. Bring your family. We had a little group yesterday. A little family came in. Mom, Dad, and some of their kids. Some people have lived here for a long time. Somebody posted on our Facebook page the other day. They said, "I've driven by your church so many times, I didn't even know what was inside it." So there's this great. Stop in and come and see. Keep your social distancing. We have hand washing and all the wonderful things. Wear a mask. Come in with your family, please, and come in anytime to stop and pray. And we'll be praying for you too. Thank you for joining us. Merry Christmas to you all, and God bless.